Hi, my name is Jake Veda. I'm one of the pastors around here. I think Chula Vista is one of the most beautiful cities in all of America. We have it all. We have the ocean. I know, just give it up. Give it up for CV. We have the ocean, we have fields, we have lakes, mountains. Chula Vista means beautiful view. My favorite interpretation is cool view. I love Chula Vista. One of the icons of Chula Vista is Mount Miguel. Now, Mount Miguel is the one with the big antennas on it. I was in La Jolla the other week, and looking down south, I could actually see Mount Miguel. This is the mountain that oftentimes during flights, you'll actually see it coming in, or in the mornings, you won't see it because it's so big that clouds are over it until the afternoon. When I first moved here, several years ago, I rented a room from a family who lived at the base of Mount Miguel. So every morning, I would wake up, and I would always feel like it was teasing me. You know what I mean? Like, I knew I needed to conquer it at some point. And then at some point, I also was dating a girl, and during this season of dating, I woke up one morning, I looked in the mirror, and I said, this is the day. That afternoon, I convinced her to climb this mountain with me. Now, there aren't trails per se. Doesn't matter. It's 4 o'clock. We're climbing up the mountain, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. At this point, I'm feeling like, maybe she'll think I'm a trailblazer. Maybe she'll propose to me when we get to the top of the mountain. And I have these grandiose visions of how impressed she's going to be that she's following me. Now, that vision started to dissipate a little bit as I was climbing the mountain, and it seemed the farther we went, the further we were from the top. At some point, the sun set. She turns to me and says, Jake, we need to head back. Okay. Start going down the mountain, tripping a little bit. We got lost a couple times. A couple hours later, 8, 9 p.m. at night, we finally get back to the house. Grass-scratched legs and muddy shoes and a defeated spirit. We go to our different rooms to change, and as I'm passing the bathroom that she's in, I definitely hear a lot of sniffles, like she's definitely crying. I knew I failed at that moment, but we got married, so it worked out in the end. I wouldn't really agree with the methodology, but it did work. So that's my story of trying to conquer a mountain. We've been in this series called Songs of the Soul, where we've been looking at the Psalms, which is a book of the Bible, and they were actually songs written to the people of their day thousands of years ago. That was the soundtrack of their life. When they were feeling something, they might have sung these songs, and it might have put words to their emotions. And we also have soundtracks in our day. For decades, we've had amazing music. I am right now going to test your musical intelligence. What I'm going to do, I'm going to read lyrics without any rhythm. I don't have any rhythm anyway, so it's very easy. And I'm going to read it just very blankly to try to confuse you. And once I read it, your goal is when I point to you to either sing the rest of the song or at least word the rest of the song. And if you get it, you might get a Tesla. Maybe. Probably not. All right, here we go. If you need me, call me. No matter where you are, no matter how far, just call my name. I'll be there in a hurry. On that, you can depend and never worry, because ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough, to keep me from getting to you. That's Marvin Gaye, 1967. Yeah, well, apparently Marvin Gaye was wrong, because there are mountains too high. It's Mount Miguel. We all have mountains to climb. There are so many mountains that we face on a regular basis. Adulting, it's very difficult. I don't care if you're 50, 20, 18, it doesn't matter. We all have difficulty with some aspect of operating as an adult. Taxes, car insurance, budgets. The moment that I realized that I had a hard time adulting was when I got pulled over by a police officer. Traffic violation. Anyways, red, blue lights pervading in my car. I'm already feeling like a convict. He comes up, Knocks on the window. I pull it down, and he asked the famous words, license and registration, please. And I knew I had to come clean at this moment, and I gave him my license. And then I said, sir, I've actually never had registration before. He proceeds to tell me that when you get the sticker in the mail, the piece of paper, that's actually registration. And you keep that in your car. I didn't know that. I would get the piece of paper. I would just throw away the piece of paper, put the sticker on my car, and move on. You're laughing now, but I might have just saved a lot of y'all a $200 fine because, yes, that's how much it was, $200 of a fine. Adulting can be very difficult. Or what about parenting transition? There's some parents in the room right now. I know for a lot of you, you might have some middle schoolers. You are super dad, super mom until 6th to 7th grade. And then at that point, they start looking outside of the nuclear family for influence. And they're looking at their friends. And all of a sudden, super dad turned into you're annoying, why do we have a van? The boring dad or mom. And you're shocked by that transition and you don't know how to handle it. Or maybe you have a 20-year-old. All of your life, you have been dictator parents. And then you're thrusted into a new role of being the friend, the guide, the mentor. There might be a time where your son or your daughter might come up to you and you give them sound, solid advice that is going to change their life, and they say, Dad, Mom, thank you so much. And they proceed to do the exact opposite. And you can't do anything about it. That's the worst part. Parenting transitions can be difficult, but of course there are mountains way bigger than that. What about financial instability where you feel like you can't provide for your family in the way that you want to? Or maybe a death in the family where you don't know how to operate in real life with a trauma of what you just went through. Or what about a sickness that doesn't get better and it's actually getting worse? How do we handle these mountains that we have in our lives? Psalms 121 says this: I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. This is a beautiful psalm, a psalm of safety and comfort, but there could have been some cognitive dissonance. There could have been this moment in where there's these beautiful words, but you're actually feeling confusion, anger, sadness, because what you hear from the scripture is maybe not what you felt that you've experienced in the past. And you're at the base of the mountain, and you're not equipped. And when you're not equipped to face the mountain ahead of you, immediately you'll feel fear. And nobody should face the mountains in their day with a spirit of fear. So the question that I want to answer today is this: how does God help us face our mountains? How does God help us face our mountains? Well, in order to answer that question, I want to look a little bit of the background of Psalms 121. It says, I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? We don't know exactly when this was written, but some theologians predict that it could have been written from a traveler on the way to Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the place where all the ancient festivals were held. So I'm imagining someone in a cart with a donkey leading them up to Jerusalem. And why do I say up? Jerusalem was based on a mountain. North, south, east, west. It doesn't matter where you are. You're going to have to climb this mountain in order to get to the destination. Mountains were a little scary back then. They're filled with beggars who wanted to take advantage of you, thieves who wanted to steal from you, tricksters who wanted to trick you. And what you had to do was look at the mountain and find a way to conquer it. So I'm imagining this cool, artsy guy in the back of a cart writing down, I lift my eyes to the mountains. And he's filled with dread. How am I going to conquer this? Because I want to conquer it to reach the destination, but I don't know how. Of course, he proceeds to say, well, through my faith, I'm going to conquer it. But today, that seems a little too ethereal, metaphorical. So I want to break down, how does God actually help us conquer the mountains of our day? In order to do that, I wanted to break down 3 different types of mountains that I believe we all face on a regular basis. I think the first type of mountain that we're faced is mountains that are easier than expected to climb. Those are the type of mountains that you might get in a plane and you're just going over the mountain, where it feels bigger than it actually is. Number 2, I think there are types of mountains that we should avoid altogether. Those types of mountains, we should maybe go around. And then lastly, I do believe there are some types in where we start, we can't go over, we can't go around, and we just have to go through. So with over, around, and through, how does God uniquely help us in each of those types of mountains that we face? I work with students, and over the years, I've had a lot of seniors come up to me, and they are struggling with decision paralysis. They have decision fatigue, and they're like, what should I do after high school? I could take a gap year. I could go to a local community college, maybe Point Loma, or maybe I'm going to go across country. Maybe I'm going to go to another country. They have all of these ideas, and they don't know what to do. The question that I'll ask is, well, have you applied anywhere? Parents know this. No, not yet. I was planning on doing it. And then I tell them, well, I guess you're going to take a gap year then. No, I don't tell them that. What I tell them is start with applying. Just start with applying to colleges, and then usually with some acceptance letters and some rejection letters, it might be a lot easier for you to make a decision. It's a huge mountain, but once they take the first step, it's actually easier than they thought. You can write this down. This is the first fill-in, or second fill-in. It says this: God helps us over the mountain with perseverance. He helps us over the mountain with perseverance. When I think of someone going over a mountain, if they say that, they're not climbing the mountain. They're getting in a plane. They're going over the mountains. And that's what I'm thinking of, is taking that first step into the plane, and then the rest is history. Not every problem is like this. Some problems are like this. Did you know that do not fear is written 365 times in the Bible? Y'all, this is like a easy pitch for a pastor. You know where I'm going with this. There's 365 days of the year. Every single day, you could wake up and read a different scripture of God saying, do not fear. Do not fear. Some of the hardest, biggest mountains that we face are actually hills when we look back, because all we needed to do was take the first step. And that perceived obstacle of that first step is where God meets us with do not fear, the perseverance that it takes to get up and step onto the plane, and the rest is history. One of my favorite verses is this. It says, do not despise small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Maybe for you, you're imagining your tombstone saying, death by teeth, because you haven't been to the dentist for 10 years, and you are so fearful. But all you need to do is set up an appointment with your local dentist, and then those fears are completely alleviated. Maybe you have a conflict with a coworker, and it seems like it'll never be finished, but then you actually decide to be honest with them for the first time ever. And they're like, yeah, sounds great. And the problem doesn't exist anymore. Or maybe you feel disconnected from your partner, and you felt that you might have lost the spark because of family life, the busyness, and then you realize you haven't done date night for 3 years, and you start a date night, and all of a sudden the spark starts coming back. Sometimes there are problems that seem bigger than they actually are. God helps us take the first step. Do not fear. He helps us over the mountain with perseverance. Secondly, what do we do with mountains that actually aren't meant for us to climb in the first place? You can write down, this is the second type of mountain. That is, God helps us around the mountain with perspective. God helps us around the mountain with perspective. There's this moment in where Jesus is wrongly convicted, and then he's wrongly arrested. And at this moment he was wrongly arrested, he's with his friends, and one of his friends, Peter, takes out his sword and cuts off one of the person's ears that's trying to arrest Jesus. And Jesus is like, put your sword away. this is actually not the battle that we need to fight right now. And there are many points in where Jesus, being on this earth, constantly helped redirect our attention to the true mountains that we should face. And there are many mountains that we should actually avoid altogether. For some of you, you've taken out your sword a lot of times and when you probably shouldn't have, like on social media when someone disagrees with you, you're not even taking out your sword. You got your breastplate on, your helmet, your shield. You are ready to systematically disprove this person's position on said topic. But the question that maybe God would pose is this the hill that you really want to die on? Or another question that's even better is, are you willing to face the consequences for climbing this mountain? Is it worth the anger that you're going to have all day because of responding to a comment on social media and maybe not making the effective change that you would like? Maybe is it worth when all your family gets into the minivan going to church and someone disagrees with you? Is it worth conquering that petty fight, destroying it? But then you have family tension all of 4th of July. Or is it worth getting mad that the highway entrance was closed, which happened to me, and you're late for work, and then all of a sudden you have an unproductive morning because you are obsessing over the thought. For some reason, you think the more you think about it, you're gonna conquer this mountain. Is it worth those consequences of those actions? I believe oftentimes when we face those types of mountains, God can uniquely give us blinders. It's like, all right, put your blinders on, and you're going to walk around the mountain. And how does God give us these blinders? I believe, guess what? Through the Bible. The whole Bible is a gigantic love story written from God to his people. And during this narrative, there are many points in where Jesus sits down, the height of this biblical story or this love story, and he says to his people, hey, you can really sum up the whole Bible in this: love God and love people. And when there are mountains that we face that don't directly align with truly loving God and loving people, maybe that's a mountain that you should avoid entirely. Trust me, we all have mountains to face. Let's pick and choose our battles when we can. God helps us around the mountain by giving us perspective. Some battles just aren't meant for us. All right, thirdly, lastly, what about mountains that are impossible to climb? There's a verse in Corinthians that says this: no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. There are mountains in where you can't go over, you can't go around, and you're climbing and you hope a plane's gonna come. You hope blinders are gonna come your way so you can walk around, but then all you see is a shovel right next to you. I'm gonna use this mic right now. And there's a shovel right next to you. And all you can do is start digging. And you're bruised and you're bloody and you're muddy, and the farther you dig, the farther or the more the darkness encompasses you. But also the farther you dig, the farther you get into the heart of the mountain. And I do strongly believe that the farther you get into the heart of the mountain, the closer you get to the heart of God. It says in another psalm that God is close to the brokenhearted. When Jesus was doing ministry for 3 years, people got so frustrated with him. He would only spend time with the poor and the powerless. He would spend time with the people who desperately needed it. Jesus' promise to us is, if you ask for his presence, you shall receive his presence. And in those darkest moments, that's God's bread and that's his butter. That's where he feels so tangible so often, is through those types of moments. So when you're shoveling, God is providing the light through the darkness, through the tunnel. It's not going to make it go away. And let's be honest, a lot of us, we can feel that God's protection means prevention. But oftentimes, God's protection just means his presence. And he provides us himself through the darkness so that when we get to the other side,
God also promises us what the enemy meant for evil, I'm turning it to good. And some of the darkest moments of our lives, I bet you could think back right now, some of those times where it seemed impossible to get through are some of the best parts of your story now. The broken pieces turned into a mosaic of art because you decided to let God in with the presence of him as you're going through the mountain. So, you're at the base of the mountain. What do you do now? Here are some 3 practical steps as you're facing whatever mountain in your life. The first thing, to identify the mountain. This seems obvious, but did you know with Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a 12-step program. Millions of people have gone through it and been liberated from their affliction of addiction. The first step is to admit that you are powerless over alcohol. That's a dramatic sentence. To admit you are powerless over alcohol. The point is, you need to admit that there's a gigantic mountain in front of you. And until you're willing to admit that, you cannot conquer it. So maybe for you, you need to realize that your marriage is on the rocks. Maybe you need to realize that the destructive self-thoughts you've had about yourself is actually debilitating, or that you do have an addiction. And these are hard things to admit, but it is the first step in the ability to conquer the mountain. Secondly, clarify how to face it. Once you admit the mountain that you're facing is actually there, you need to figure out, okay, how do I want to conquer this mountain? Some of you always have the same technique, and maybe now you're like, oh, there are different ways to conquer the problems in my life. So maybe you do need to go over the mountain. You need to take the first step. Or maybe for you, you need to put blinders on and you just need to go around the mountain. You need to walk away. Or maybe for you, it is the third one where you can't do any of the other ones and you just need to get a shovel and start digging through to the heart of the mountain and ultimately the heart of God. And once you clarify how to face it, thirdly, you remember God's help. You know a mountain will be easy to go over if you just begin. Maybe that's the step, because God will give you perseverance to take it. Or maybe you know a mountain that's not meant for you to climb in the first place. God will give you perspective to put your head down and walk around. Or maybe you need to face an impossible mountain, and God provides you his presence to go through it. You know, as we end, I was thinking about Psalms 121. It starts with, my eyes look to the mountain. Where does my help come from? And when he was writing this, the author, we don't know exactly for sure, but some theologians say that he could have been going to Jerusalem, which was the ancient festivals where they took place. And I can imagine with a donkey and a cart, and he's sitting all artistically, writing down. I don't know if that's the case. And he's looking at this mountain, and he's actually filled with dread. Because back in the day, when you were faced with mountains, there was beggars, there were magicians, there were people who wanted to take advantage of you. Mountains were dangerous to conquer. So he knew he wanted to conquer it to get to the other side, but he knew he had to face the mountain in front of him in order to do it. And I've always been inspired by the audacity of that writer saying, I look to the mountains, and then it says, where does my help come from? And he immediately says, my help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. I don't know about you, but I want to have that same faith today. When I look at the mountain, to feel equipped that God will help me. I was in South Park last weekend. My family came to town. And my dad, my mom, a couple of my siblings, and my sister asked my dad a question. We're eating pasta, the sun's setting, it's perfect. And my sister asked my dad, Dad, what's one word that would describe Mom? And my dad looks at my mom, pauses, and then tears well up in his eyes. And he says, I I don't have a word. But what I do know is that for the past 30 plus years, I can look behind me of all the mountains that we've conquered together and say there's nobody else that I want to be with. Now, that's not one word, but as I was prepping this message of how God helps conquer, I thought that was a beautiful image of our relationship with our Father, with our God. I bet you could look back at the mountain peaks that you conquered and say, wow, how God helped. So you're at the base of the mountain. What's your next step? I'm going to pray. We're going to go into a song called Highs and Lows. And I love this song because the song talks about whether you're on the mountaintop or whether you're in the valley, the high or the low, God is chasing you down. He won't let you fall. He won't forget about you. What do you need? Do you need perseverance? What do you need? Do you need perspective? Do you need my presence? I'm here. Do you want my help? So a question I want to ask during this next song, go ahead and stay seated. But the question I want to ask you is, what is your mountain? I want to do something a little different. I'm going to pause for 15 seconds. I'm going to pray after these 15 seconds. But with those, that mountain that you're facing, let's give a 15-second pause for you to honestly discuss with God about how he might be able to help you conquer the mountain of your day. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from you, God, the maker of heaven and earth. Thank you for chasing me down. God, thank you for the ways that you've helped me in the past. And God, I ask that with the mountains ahead of me, the mountains ahead of us, God, you'd be with us. You'd help us. Show us your presence. Show us your perspective. Show us how to persevere. Thank you, God.